You're listening to Mammal Watching with Charles Foley and John Hall. You can find other episodes at mammalwatching.com/podcast.
Well, hello and welcome to the Mammal Watching podcast with me, John Hall from Washington, D.C.
And me, Charles Foley, also from Washington, D.C.
Yes, it's that most special time of the year. Charles and I are together with our children and with Lara, Charles's wife, to bring the new year in and to show that it is possible to take a trip without looking for mammals, which we've done. And, it's even been fun, sort of.
Yeah, it's more or less. Yeah, it hasn't been too bad. And today what we're going to do is skip our usual introduction, and we are going to go straight into the interview with our speaker. And we have 5 hours to try and get this out before the new year comes in. So we'll be doing that. And just to say to everyone, Happy New Year. And we hope that 2022 is a fantastic mammal watching year for you.
Yes, and for all of us. Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy New Year.
Well, our guest on the program today is Bob Pitman. And between 1976 and 2019, Bob worked as a marine ecologist for NOAA's National Marine Fisheries Service in California. And he has participated in over 150 scientific research cruises in all the oceans of the world, including more than 30 trips to Antarctica. He has published numerous scientific papers and co-authored 5 books, including 2 editions of A Guide to Marine Mammals of the World. His research has focused on diverse topics, including flying fish systematics and the feeding ecology of tropical seabirds. But his primary focus has been whales and dolphins, their distribution, their ecology, and their conservation. He is a world expert on beaked whales and was a member of the expedition that chronicled the extinction of the Yangtze River dolphin. And he has continued to be closely involved in efforts to prevent extinction of the vaquita, now the most critically endangered marine mammal on the planet. In recent years, Bob's main research interest has been the ecology of killer whales. And since 2003, he has led efforts to describe 5 different ecotypes of killer whales from the Southern Ocean, each with their own unique color patterning and different food and foraging habits. And recent genetic analysis suggests that these might, in fact, be separate species. And Bob is involved in ongoing research on how these various killer whale forms manage to coexist. Bob, welcome to the program.
Glad to be here.
Welcome, Bob. It's great to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Bob, I have to take a moment to thank your friend Todd Pusser for putting us in touch with you. Todd wrote to me and said that he had listened to some of our podcasts and that we really should have you on here as a guest. And he had mentioned that you'd published some of the first ever descriptions of beaked whale species and worked on orcas and vaquitas, etc. And to top it all off, that you had seen more cetacean species than anyone else on the planet. And I wrote back and said that he had me at beaked whales. And then it took us a little while to track you down because you've been out in the high seas searching for interesting species. So it's really good to have you here on the program. Bob, can you, first of all, explain to us how you became interested in whales and dolphins and what your path was to studying them?
Yes, in the early 1970s, I was going to college in San Diego, and I took an ornithology class just because it was there, and got very interested in it. And the instructor of the class was working on seabirds at the time, and when the class was done, he asked me if I'd be interested in making a research cruise with him from Long Beach, California to Tierra del Fuego. He got a small grant to make bird observations and collect some specimens, and it was going to be on the U.S. Antarctic research vessel, the Hero, which was the only support vessel for Antarctica at the time. So I immediately dropped out of college and made that trip. The ship broke down off Mexico, and my mentor had to get off, but I went ahead and did the trip. And when I got off in Ushuaia, Argentina, I knew that that's all I wanted to do for the rest of my life. I saw enough birds and whales. In fact, I never even went back to college. And I have got on every research cruise I could ever since then. So that kind of got me going in that direction. About that time, when I got back, the tuna dolphin problem erupted. In the Eastern Tropical Pacific, U.S. Tuna fishermen were killing hundreds of thousands of dolphins every year catching tunas. And there was a public outcry, and National Marine Fisheries Service was tasked with trying to find out what the status of the stocks was and what kind of impact this fishing was having on them. So they needed people to go out and do a couple of these cruises and see what was going on. And I put my hand up immediately. And that first cruise was in 1976. And it was supposed to be just a couple of cruises to identify spotted and spinner dolphins and see how many there were. And it turned out to be a 40-year long career for me. And we were there primarily to look for the dolphins involved in the fishery, but we took the opportunity to learn to identify everything else that was out there. And I was primarily interested in seabirds, but as it turns out, marine mammals were going to pay the bills. The American public was more interested in the welfare of marine mammals than marine birds. And it turned out to be plenty of cruises to go out and check on the status of stocks of whales and dolphins. So that's what I did.
Wow. And so you worked for NOAA for 30 years or so?
About 40 years. Yes.
40 years.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
I am so envious of your life so far. It's just amazing. I love spending time at sea, but I've never snagged anything like that even once. When we first started doing this, there was no protocol for how you go out and census dolphins, so that had to be kind of developed on the fly, and it's turned into a real science over the years. And we have these really big 25 by 150 power mounted binoculars that we scan the ocean with, and it allows us to see things a long way off, uninterrupted, and it has allowed us to learn how to identify a lot of these things. Much of this stuff had never been identified before because we were out in the open ocean in the tropics, and there were quite a few species that were only known from strandings, and people didn't know how to identify them. So we had to kind of start this from the bottom, and it's been a fun career. Wow. It's amazing. So I saw a picture of you with a pair of those like industrial sized binoculars on the boat. How on earth do you get the stability to, even though I know they're on the deck, to look through those and see anything with movement of the boat? Well,
fortunately, we were in the Eastern Tropical Pacific,
right? And
the water is pretty good out there most of the time. But the binoculars, they go up and down and sideways, so they're you can work them against the swell and the seas quite a bit. Yeah. When it gets really bad, we have to shut down the effort. If we get a storm, we don't do anything for a couple of days, try to run away from it. But most of the time, it's pretty good and it's not a problem.
Okay.
And how much time will you have? Let's say you're out and it's daylight. How many hours a day would you have someone on the binoculars?
Well, for this particular set of cruises, we had 2-3 person teams, and so we manned them from sun up to sundown, and we'd rotate off and on the binoculars. We'd have a data recorder, and like I say, when we first started out, they were primarily interested only in the dolphins that were being killed by the fishermen out there, but we were seeing a lot of stuff that we didn't know what it was, and we just took the opportunity on good weather days when animals were being cooperative to go over and photograph these things and try to identify them. Eventually, we figured them all out. There weren't any field guides at the time to help us through this, so it's been an adventure.
And how many species have you seen of cetaceans?
Well, when I first started doing this work back in the middle 70s, there were 76 recognized species of cetaceans, whales and dolphins. Currently, there are 93, and I'm at 86 right now. There are 7 I haven't seen. 2 of them were described in the last 2 years, and 5 of them have not been identified alive in the wild that I'm aware of. So,
what are those species?
the two new species is Sato's beaked whale from northern Japan. I think that's the whale watch boats see them there a couple times every year. So they mostly go out to see humpback whales and killer whales, but if they don't see any, they go out to the shelf edge, and that's when they run into these. They call them ravens because they're quite blackish. Anyway, so that one's pretty easy. The other one is Indus river dolphin, was split from the Ganges river dolphin. So that's a trip to Pakistan. I may save that one for last. And then the other ones are beaked whales, Mesoplodon. And Mesoplodon are quite interesting. Most people aren't aware that there are such things as beaked whales. There's actually, right now, there's 24 species of beaked whales in about 6 genera and 16 species of Mesoplodon. And those Mesoplodon have been difficult. They can be difficult to identify. The young ones all look the same. Most of the females look the same. For the most part, you have to find the males to tell them apart.
Wow, that's 86 species is it's breathtaking. I thought I'd been doing well. I was doing quite well on 51 or 52, wherever I've seen, but yeah, 86 blows out of the water. So at what point did this become a quest to try to see all the species? And have you designed your research to try and to fill the gaps in your list, or has it been sort of bycatch along the way?
For the most part, most of the species I've seen have been during research cruises. Spent a lot of time in Antarctica. The water between the continents, the southern continents and Antarctica, has a lot of things that people hardly ever see. There's a couple things down there I've only seen once. And so for me, just working on research projects in different parts of the world where I know that there are interesting things, that has been a big part of it. And my wife also indulges me on what we call cetacean vacations. We go to places where we know there's going to be things that I haven't seen before, or her. And so this has allowed me to pick up a few that aren't going to be available during research cruises, like river dolphins and narwhals and things like that. So now I'm retired, so I can pick and choose what I want to do. And I didn't think it would ever be possible to see all the world's cetaceans because those beaked whales were going to be too much of a problem. But now there have been some real advances in acoustics, and you can tow a hydrophone behind the boat and you can hear them. And it turns out they have species-specific vocalizations, so you can actually identify them. And for me, more importantly, you can tell if there's a whale down there calling that hasn't been identified before. And you can, when they quit calling, you know they're coming to the surface. They may or may not be close, but if you have those big binoculars, for instance, you can look around and hope to see them. And then another tricky part is you have to get some DNA, unless they're one of the more identifiable types, and most of them aren't. Which means we use a crossbow and fire a dart at them and take a little pencil eraser sized piece of skin and we can identify them. Or we can collect eDNA, which is if you get to the spot where they dive, they leave a little slick on the surface, and you can scoop up some water and hope to collect some DNA that way. So these are a couple of innovations that weren't here even 10 years ago that I think are going to allow me to see all the world's whales.
That's fantastic. And so my few encounters with beaked whales have generally been something, as soon as you see it, it goes down. It's like, it's not usually close enough to identify. How on earth do you get close enough to get a crossbow onto them?
Sometimes they can be friendly. And something else that we have found out about beaked whales is they dive for an hour or two, and then, like I say, they echolocate when they're at depth. But when they start coming to the surface, they quit echolocating, and you can tell when they're coming to the surface because you get radio silence. And another thing that they do is when they're starting to come to the surface, about the time they quit echolocating, they veer off in random directions. And for beaked whales, the main enemy is killer whales at the surface. And there's no way that they're going to make noise all the way to the surface because there'll be somebody waiting for them up there. So we know enough about these beaked whales to know when they're coming to the surface. We know they're not going to be exactly where they went down. And so usually they're within a mile or so. And if we have big eye binoculars, we're scanning. We've got several people looking out for them. Or we can just head off in some direction and hope they come up close to us. And they do sometimes, especially if you're in an area where there are a few around. So there are ways of dealing with beaked whales.
Yeah, wow.
And typically they're open sea creatures, aren't they, the beaked whales?
Yes. Part of the reason so little is known about them is they live almost entirely in deep water. Most cetacean research tends to take place on continental shelves and nearshore areas just because the animals are accessible. And these beaked whales are out in deep water. They don't come into shallow water at all unless they're having some problems. I wanted to mention another thing about beaked whales that works in our favor is once they come up from one of these deep dives and they quit vocalizing, they come to the surface and they'll take a few breaths, the whole group will, and then they'll go back down and dive maybe 200 meters or so and swim along. They need to decompress. So they're not making any noises then, but once you see them and they dive again, chances are they're going to be back at the surface again in another 20 minutes or so, and you can see the direction they're heading and try to be up there when they come up to the surface. And they'll do these interval dives, sometimes 4, 5, 6 times. So you've got some opportunities there to see them. And we never knew this for years. We didn't know this, and we would see them dive and figure, well, that's it. They're gone for an hour and a half. We don't know where they're coming up. So, but now that we know that they do these interval dives, and you can tell by their dive behavior if they're going down on a terminal dive and going to be gone for an hour or two, or if they're just going down for an interval dive and will be coming back up again. So we've got some tricks up our sleeve for working with these things, and this is part of what's making it possible to see all of these. Right.
And are there any sort of beaked whale hotspots around the world where you can go and see 2 or 3 different species on one cruise?
I can't think of any real hot spots. There are places like Monterey, California. There's a canyon that comes up in there kind of close. You can see Baird's beaked whale there sometimes. I can't really think of a hot spot. It would have to be a place where the continental shelf just drops straight off, like around islands. In the Bahamas, you can see dense beaked whales there, and Gervais beaked whales fairly regular. And you don't have to go very far off because it just drops straight off there. So islands are good places if there are animals around. There aren't any places that I can think of where they advertise, going out to see beaked whales. Most of the time, like I say, they're interested in humpbacks and killer whales and some of the flashier stuff. And most people, when they go out whale watching, they don't want to see a 15-foot Mesopodon roll over a couple times and disappear. There are half a dozen of us around the world that would pay big to see that, but that's about it.
I was going to say there's more than half a dozen, I'm sure. And also, I think, one place that strikes a couple of things, places where I've seen or heard of them, the Bay of Biscay, between the UK and Spain. You used to always see cuviers and northern bottlenose whales off the ferry between those two. But also Guadalupe Island, I think, where they do great white shark diving, cage diving. I think cuviers are positively common there, and they often see Bairds, if I remember rightly. But again, they're not trips; they're sort of by catch of the shark diving.
Yes, actually, I was on a trip 2 weeks ago with a guy who's doing the research on Cuvier's beaked whale there, and they have 70 or 80 identified individuals, and they see them pretty much every time they're there. But I had been there probably a dozen times previously for different reasons. I never saw any there. It's you just have to know, where you're going and where to wait. You have to be in the right spot. So, and at the right time. There are relatively few places in the world where people do research on beaked whales just because they're hard to access, and they're hard to get close to. And Bahamas and Guadalupe are two of the best places that I could think of. And actually, the guy that works on the Cuvier's beaked whale there, Gustavo, we asked him about Baird's beaked whale there, and he said he'd never seen him, and he's spent 3 years there now or so. So,
well, that rumor squashed.
So
I was thinking of going there to see them, but obviously not. So, thank you very much.
Best you knew in advance, John.
Yeah.
And I heard you have a story about pygmy right whales. Is that correct?
Well, it's not much of a story, but yeah. Charles, I'm amazed to hear somebody throw out pygmy right whale. I've seen them once in my entire life and have done dozens of trips to Antarctica, and they're probably the hardest non-beaked whale out there to see. And I wasn't aware that other people even knew.
Exactly. No, exactly. That's the whole point. These things are like mythical beasts that, only people like yourself who've lived 40 years out on the oceans ever get to see. That's what makes it amazing for me.
And they're also in a family all of their own. So someone like Mac Hunter was our very first guest, who is trying to see all the families of mammals. That's one he hasn't seen, and he has no idea how to go about seeing one. And it's maybe the hardest mammal family to see.
Yeah, they've been seen off Australia, and of course they strand in South Africa sometimes.
Yeah.
And the ones I saw were south of New Zealand, and I'm still not hearing much of people seeing. I haven't heard anybody seeing them alive like we did. I mean, we had, I think, 17 or something in one group, and spent some time with them. But that's the only time I've seen them, and I know of just a couple people that have ever seen them alive. And those are people who work on whale research vessels in Antarctica, so they're tough to find.
Bob, you've had so many extraordinary encounters with cetacean species, but I know killer whales are some of your favorites. Would you tell us some of your favorite stories about working with those?
Yeah, they're such fascinating creatures. We were in McMurdo a few years ago, which is a U.S. research base in Antarctica, south of New Zealand, and doing killer whale research. And we would take a helicopter out to the ice edge and look for killer whales working along the ice edge. And these are type C killer whales. They have a small slanted eye patch, very distinctive. The smallest killer whale, 4 meters. And they work along the ice edge, and they feed entirely on fish, mostly toothfish. And during the summertime, when the ice breaks up, they'll head up these leads, these big cracks in the ice. And we fly along in the helicopter and look for the killer whales and see which way they're going, pull up ahead of them, land the helicopter, and go out to the ice. And then we can take pictures of them for our catalog when they go by, take biopsy samples if we need them. And I remember one day we had a bunch of them were going by, and I was with some people, and they were doing all the photography. And I wondered if the killer whales even knew that we were there. So I thought I was going to make a snowball and throw it at one, and just to see what it would do. And this big female came by, and the snow was so dry that I was having trouble making a snowball. The first one I threw just dissolved. So I patted it down a little harder, and she came by, and probably 3-4 meters away, and I threw the snowball, and it made a little pat sound as it just dissolved. And I was afraid she wasn't even going to feel it because it's sub-freezing water there. And she stopped immediately and just sank. I thought, well, that's kind of weird. On the other side of the lead there, another 20, 30 feet away, was a bunch of pack ice, bergy bits, these little small pieces of ice that had broken off, and the wind had pushed them to the far side. And it was about 20 feet thick, this pile of ice there. And while I was looking around to see what happened to her, I noticed that there was a piece of ice about the size of a basketball that was moving through the fast ice there, or through the ice accumulation there. and it came out into the middle of the channel there. And then she came up. She'd been pushing it out with her rostrum, and she arched her head and hit this chunk of ice and threw it several feet in the air. And she spent about the next 10 minutes lofting this chunk of ice into the air right there in front of me. And then she kind of lost interest and swam off. And to this day, I think I taught a killer whale how to throw snowballs.
Oh, wow.
Another time we were off the Aleutian Islands tagging killer whales, putting satellite tags on them. And it was a beautiful day. We got into a group of about 4 of them, and my colleague, John Durbin, put a tag on one of the whales. And within just a couple of minutes, that whole group got up and started charging through the water at full speed. And at first we thought maybe they were responding to the tagging, but we tagged scores of killer whales and never had this kind of reaction. So we decided to tag along with them and see what was going on, because usually when killer whales get up and run, there's something in front of them that they're interested in. We stayed with these guys for almost exactly 1 hour. They traveled 9 miles. At the end of their run, they came to a minke whale, cow and calf. The cow saw the killer whales and just left. She just left her calf there. She has no defenses against killer whales. She can go breed another day. The calf was going to have to fend for itself. The killer whales swam around the calf for just 10 or 15 seconds. And then the matriarch, the mother of the group, rammed it from below, knocked it completely out of the water. It went down. They took it down. That's the last we saw of it alive. And they fed on it for about an hour and a half. These killer whales heard a sound in the water 9 miles away. They knew exactly what it was. They knew exactly where it was, and they went in a straight line to it. And that just gives you some idea about the predatory power of killer whales in the ocean. I mean, that's at least an 18-mile swath they cut through the ocean, listening for things. And that's primarily how they find their prey for these mammal-eating killer whales, is just to listen for them.
Wow. That's just incredible. Would a very good hydrophone pick up a minke whale from 9 miles away?
Probably. I'm not sure. Yeah. I have to wonder what kind of noise they're making. A minke whale with a calf, if they make a noise like that in the ocean, I mean, it's over. So
yeah, exactly.
It's certainly not adaptive. I don't know why they would do that. I don't know why they would make that loud a sound, especially if the calf's right next to them. Humpback whales, for instance, they make very kind of small muffled sounds between the mother and the calf. And it's for that reason. They don't want to alert killer whales.
Wow. Extraordinary.
That is extraordinary.
One more. We were in Antarctica a few years ago, and out in a small boat, looking for killer whales to photograph and biopsy and stuff. And we have a catalog of pretty much all the killer whales in the peninsula area, and there's over 1,000 individuals there, 3 different types, and so we see a lot of the same killer whales over. And there's one group there out of all those killer whales that's, for some reason, they're always very friendly. And when we're out in the boat, they always come over. It's the mother and her offspring, and the young ones come over, and they'll bump the pontoons with their heads and spy hop next to the boat and stuff. And these killer whale groups, they are matriarchal. The oldest female is the mother to some of those, and then the offspring of some of her daughters may be with them too. But she pretty much runs the group. It's, whenever they do something, she's in charge of it. And so while we were there and the young ones were around the boat, they had been chasing penguins. This type of killer whale, we call them Gerlache killer whales, B2s. We've never seen them. We don't know what they feed on, mostly because they dive deep, and when they come back, they're not bringing anything. They're probably taking small fish or squid or something, but they do chase penguins around sometimes. and they eat them sometimes. Usually they open them up and just take the breast muscle off, kind of a tiny little tidbit. But most often they will chase them around for 15 or 20 minutes, bump them out of the water, and then give them a little squeeze when they're done with them, and leave the carcass floating at the surface. They're like, cats playing with mice or something. But these groups, because they're related individuals and spend decades with each other, they cooperate a lot in their hunting, and they share all their food, no matter what size it is. They share it among the group. And while we were there this one time, and the youngsters were playing around the boat, the mother had caught a Gentoo penguin, and she had it in her mouth, and she swam over to our boat, and she was a meter away from the pontoons, stuck her head out of the water, gave it a little squeeze so it wouldn't be swimming away, and just dropped it there for us. And I guess that was her way of telling her that we were part of the pack.
Wow.
And I've heard a number of people that work on killer whales have stories about killer whales bringing over prey to them and dropping it off. So it's interesting. Because those groups are led by a single individual, they tend to be personality driven, and every killer whale group has a different personality, because there's one female in there that's kind of running the show, and however she decides to run it is the way things go.
Wow. Does that have any parallels with elephants, Charles?
Yeah, I've studied elephants for many years, and elephants will, when they know you, they'll sometimes walk up to the car, put their trunk in, will interact with you. Normally, when they have infants, they're very protective of the infants, and they'll keep the infant away from you and try and hide it behind the feet, etc. But there was one young female. She was about 16, 17 years old at the time. Her name was Ganesh, and she had a newborn infant calf. And I remember she just pushed this little infant, is only a few days old, up to the car and took a couple of steps back, and just basically saying, "Hey, look what I've done! Look what I've made!" So a great moment.
Wow.
That sounds a lot like those gray whales down in Scammons Lagoon and Guerrero Negro. The females have their calves down there, and there's whale watch boats down there quite a bit, and the females will nudge their calves over to the boat, and then they'll back away from it and let the people interact with the calves, scratch them on the head and stuff, and it sounds very similar.
That sounds like free babysitting to me, but anyway.
Maybe. A photographer friend of mine told me once that he wanted to get a picture of this from underwater while the people were interacting with it, and he slipped in behind the boat with his camera, and the minute he went in the water, the female come in and took the calf away. So
wow.
Got to watch out for those babysitters,
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Didn't pass his background check.
Well, I could tell you another story.
Yeah, sure, please.
We're down off of southern Mexico, far offshore. There's a place down there, Costa Rica Dome, where the blue whales go down, and they can feed during the wintertime, and they calve down there. And we are always interested in blue whales for photo ID and collect biopsy samples as part of the population studies that have been going on of California, especially, and Mexico for decades now. So, and whenever you find blue whales away from the regular places, they're even more important. So we were doing our dolphin surveys one day, and we found 3 blue whales, and they were migrating between Costa Rica Dome and heading north, because they were in between there. So we put the launch out. They weren't together. They were scattered probably over the course of a mile or so. And we went out in the launch, took some pictures of the first one, and bounced a dart off of it, picked it up, and started going to the second whale, and noticed that the first whale was kind of following us. Well, that's kind of interesting. So we got our photos and the biopsy of the second one and started moving to the third one, and the whale was still following us there. So we went up to the third one, got our biopsy and photo ID. They're pretty easy group to work with. And that whale was still with us. So I asked him to just stop the engine. We'll just sit there and see what this was about. And this blue whale came and circled around us, and then it dove down, and it was just gin clear water. And it's rolling over on its side and looking up at us with this big eyeball, probably curious about what we're doing out there, why interact with it. And when we finally left, and we had to run fast to get away from this thing, and wanted to stay with us. I had to think that blue whales historically have had practically nothing to fear in the ocean, and until whaling began. And I think that any genes or predisposition to be curious were probably eliminated a long time ago. And it's been about 50 years or so now since we stopped slaughtering blue whales in the ocean like this. And I have to wonder if maybe we're starting to see some of these animals act like they did before whaling. Maybe curiosity has come back into the behavior that these things do. And I've worked with Antarctic minke whales in the Antarctic Peninsula area, and I've noticed over the last 15 years or so, the Antarctic minke whales are getting quite curious, and the people on the tour boats talk about it quite a bit too. They used to just run away from everybody all the time, and now they're following them back to the boat and swimming around and rolling over and looking at the tourists and stuff. So I don't know. Maybe we're seeing some dividends from the fact that we've quit whaling a lot of these things. So
it's a lovely story. Gives you hope, doesn't it? Yeah. And obviously in the 40 years that you've been working on whales and dolphins, the tourism industry, the whale watching industry has exploded, hasn't it? What impact does that generally have on the whales? Is it mostly positive? Does it depend on species?
Yeah, I think it depends on the species quite a bit. There are species that are approachable and others that just are not. And there are fan favorites out there, like you say, humpbacks and killer whales and blue whales. They're the ones that people really want to see. And to me, it's about like keeping killer whales in captivity, for instance. I think that's one of the worst things you could do to a killer whale. I mean, they're used to living these rich social lives with related members for decades, and they hunt together. They know everything about each other, And when you put one of these in captivity, you take that away. They're used to swimming 150 miles a day in the wide open ocean, and they lose all that in captivity. And it must be like the worst thing in the world for them to be pent up in a little concrete pool like that. But most of the people that I know, what they know about killer whales, they learned at a marine park, and they got to see these spectacular animals and just how beautiful, how big they are, and how intelligent they are. And I think part of the reason we have such the conservation movement that we do to protect whales is because people got some exposure to these things. And as much as I don't like the idea of having killer whales in captivity, what people learn from there, I think, offsets the damage done. And I think it's the same with like whale watching.
Right.
I think if people don't go out there and have their boat next to a humpback, they have no idea what they're going to be losing if we don't take care of these things. So
yeah,
to me, it's an acceptable price to pay.
Sure.
Yeah.
And now, as I mentioned in the introduction, you were on the research expedition that went to look for the baiji, the Chinese river dolphin, and basically declared it extinct. And there's another small species of porpoise found in Mexico or Mexican waters, the vaquita, which appears to be going the same way. And I know that you've been working with this species recently. And what are your feelings about this? Do you harbor any hopes that it's going to survive?
Well, in 2006, we went to China as part of a multinational survey to look for baiji, the Yangtze River dolphin. We wanted to get some kind of idea of where they were, how many there were, because they were going to follow that up with an expedition to catch some of these and put them in oxbow lakes and establish a breeding population. So we had 2 boats, and we went from Three Gorges Dam to Shanghai twice, and there were no baiji. And it's flat, calm there. We had our big eye binoculars. There was no way we missed anything. And so, at the end of it, we said, these guys are gone. We're here too late. And, I know people that had seen baiji in the wild. The last live one seen was in 2001. It was a female stranded in Shanghai. And the last photo was in 2002. So, here's an animal that's been around for over 1 million years, and our expedition missed them by 4. So anyway, that was sobering. And those of us on the expedition were very much aware that the next one in line then was vaquita. It's a small porpoise that lives in the extreme northern Gulf of California. And the range is so tiny. There's a rock there, Consag Rock, that's 200 or 300 feet tall. And I've never seen a vaquita where I couldn't turn around and see that rock. So it's a tiny little area to protect, but apparently it's too much. We did our first survey in 1993. We were looking for other species, and we got up in the northern Gulf, and it was flat calm. And I talked to the cruise leader and said, "Hey, vaquita's up here. We got the big eyes on the boat. The people know how to do this, and we got flat calm weather for the next 2 days. We should lay out a grid and see how many are here." And in 1993, we had a couple dozen sightings, and it was extrapolated to a population of 254. I've done 5 of those vaquita surveys since then. The most recent was September or October. And I would guess that there are probably less than 10 now.
Did you see any when you went on the October trip?
We did. We saw, and it's hard to tell how many there are because they're concentrated in one small area now, and we're not sure, if we saw different animals or the same ones, but it's down to a handful. And they've kind of mapped out this tiny postage stamp, this no-go zone for the fishermen. And there were something like 140 pangas out there with gill nets in the water in that area, which was the last area that they occur. So, unless something drastic happens, unless the Mexican government steps in a big way, which I don't think they're going to, I think we're going to see vaquita go the way of baiji in our lifetime.
Yeah.
Oh, tragic.
Bob, is there anything else that you'd like to share with our audience?
Yeah, I said when I started doing this, there was 76 species, and now we're up to 93. There's at least 3 or 4 more splits or whatever in the wings that I can think of. And what's really made the difference here is the same with all the animal groups that I'm sure you guys work with. Genetics has stepped in and solved a lot of mysteries for us. And I have done a lot of biopsy. Anytime I can get close to a whale or dolphin, I will try to take a skin sample off of them. And it's been a hard sell for some people. They don't think that this is a humane thing to do or something. But I have to tell you, for example, I did a series of cruises in the early 90s in the Gulf of Mexico, on the U.S. half of the Gulf of Mexico. And we found out pretty quickly that the only baleen whales, the rorquals in the Gulf, was in a tiny little area up by the Florida Panhandle, in an area called DeSoto Canyon. And we found Brutus whales there every time we went out, and they were just in that area. And I always have my crossbow with me, and I tried to talk the people who were running the trip into trying to sample these things. And they said, no, we don't We're not going to bother the whales. And so just last year, a paper came out, and they finally got around 20 years after I quit doing the surveys with them. They finally got around to collecting some biopsy samples, and it turns out this is a new species of whale. This is Rice's whale. It was published last year, a description of this thing, and it's got a population of about, well, the last estimate was 33 individuals. So, you can't protect species if you don't know what the species limits are. And I'm a strong advocate for doing as much of this DNA sampling as possible so that we know what we have. And, if we're going to make decisions to let some of these things go, at least we need to know what it is we're letting go. So
yeah,
that's my pitch for collecting biopsy samples.
Right. And the rice whale, it looks very much like a Brutus, does it?
Yes, it's very similar, but it's quite distinct genetically and morphologically. Usually if somebody says they're genetically different, the morphologist will step in and find differences. So I'm not sure what that means, but
indeed.
Yeah, it immediately went on the endangered species list.
Right. Yeah. Well,
anyway, it's only this year have I become aware that it is actually possible to see all the world's whales and dolphins, and it's because of the acoustic innovations. And pretty soon we're going to get to where they can localize whales and know exactly where they are, and then we'll be even better off. So,
and it typically is that how you do it? Is that you go out to an area, there's a beaked whale in this area that you're searching for, and then you drop in the acoustic equipment, or do you rely more on sight?
It's both. In fact, it's usually a little competitive between the acoustics people and the visual people, but together we're much stronger. And there are different ways of doing this. The acoustics, people use bottom-mounted hydrophones and leave them out for a year or two, and then come back and go through the data and tell you what was there. And for the most part, a lot of these beaked whales, they record them, they know they're different, they classify them, but they don't know what they are.
Right.
So at some time, you're going to have boats out there, people either collecting DNA or being able to visually identify these animals. But
Right.
A lot of these boats now, they tow hydrophones, so you can detect these things in real time. Mm-hmm. In September, I was off Oregon on a boat, and there's, they've got recordings up here that they think are Steineger's beaked whale and Hubb's beaked whale, but they're not sure. They're distinct enough that it is easy to tell apart. And so we were going along, and the people on the hydrophone said, "Hey, we've got, this whale we think is Hubb's, but we're not sure." And they're calling, and we stopped the boat and waited around for a couple hours, and they happened to come up right next to the boat. Todd got amazing photographs of Hubb's beaked whale, and we got a biopsy of one individual that strayed a little too close to the boat. So we were able to identify it. They were juveniles, and the juveniles are all Mesoplodon, or you can barely tell them apart, even if you have them in hand. So with the DNA, we were able to identify them. And for instance, this is, to my knowledge, only the second time Hubb's beaked whale has been identified alive in the wild. The previous time was on a trip I was on off Oregon in 1994, and we had some adult males they're easy to identify. So anyway, the acoustics got them on these guys, and then we were able to back it up with photos and biopsy. And this is what I want to do with the rest of the Mesoplodon is figure them out.
Right.
And the reason this is important is because you can't really do surveys for these kind of beaked whales because they don't show you enough, and they're not at the surface often enough. But once you know their calls and you match the calls up with a species identification, then you can put hydrophones on commercial vessels or people doing transpac sailing boats, and you can learn more about the distribution and relative abundance of beaked whales than we know about a lot of other whales. So anyway, right. It's a worthwhile thing to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah, very noble cause.
So one very final question: which is your next whale that you're going to try and find? What you're missing about 6. So which one's next on your list?
We're working on a couple of cruises, like the Hubs beaked whale cruise. Somebody sent me some photos from the Eastern Garbage Patch, and they had whales around the boat. They were out there doing fish surveys or something anyway, and they just happened to find some Mesoplodon around the boat on a couple of occasions. They look like Mesoplodon ginkgodens, ginkgo-toothed beaked whale. This, to my knowledge, hasn't been identified alive in the wild either. In fact, for the Hubs trip, we were on our way there and the engine broke down. We had to come back and get repaired, and then said, well, let's go try for Hubs. And so anyway, it turned out to be a great success, but we're going to try again next year to go there. There's a couple of beaked whales down off Baja that they're Mesoplodon. We don't know what they are. The hardest whale left on my list is probably Perrin's beaked whale, which is kind of ironic. Bill Perrin worked at the La Jolla lab where I worked with him for over 35 years. And he was probably the preeminent whale biologist of his time. And so they named it after him. And it's known from, I think, 4 strandings in Southern California and 1 from Central California. And that's all we know about it. So it's out there somewhere. They've got some calls that they think could be Perrin's beaked whale, but they don't really know. So anyway, we're going to take our boat and our team and go look for some of these mystery animals.
Go look for the unicorn. Yeah. Fantastic.
Look, if anyone can find it, I expect it'll be you, Sherlock Holmes of Wales.
Well, Bob, thank you so much for taking the time. This has been absolutely fascinating. I've hugely enjoyed it, and I'm sure our audience is going to really love hearing your stories about the orcas and the other species found in the sea.
Yeah.
Well, I'd have to tell you, I'd be interested if there are other cetacean tickers out there. I've got my group of colleagues and friends that I work with, and to the best of my knowledge, nobody has even 70. So I think there could easily be some other people out there who are after these sort of things the way we are. And I'd be interested to know if there's people out there that have some insight about some of these things and how they're doing.
I will spread the word. I know a lot of people in Australia, especially, are very keen to see a lot of things on pelagic trips, but nothing like what you've seen. But yeah, I'll send you some details of a few people. But thank you very, very much. It's absolutely fascinating listening to you. Your stories and all the breakthroughs in beaked whale research it gives me hope that I might see another couple before I die.
Here's hoping, hey?
You're listening to Mammal Watching with Charles Foley and John Hall. You can find other episodes at mammalwatching.com/podcast.